During these weeks of the Avdiivka assault, the Russian army lost more tanks and armored vehicles than in each of the previous 11 months. The city's defenders destroyed most of the infantry and equipment of the 4 motorized rifle brigades of the Russian armed forces storming north of Avdiivka. Since the beginning of the offensive, the Russians have been able to advance up to 1.5 kilometers forward, and planted a flag at night on the spoil heap of the coke plant. That is, they did not even occupy the spoil heap, but planted the flags of Russia and the USSR for a very short time and fled. The enemy can't occupy the spoil heap, because it is targeted by fire of the Ukrainian defense forces. It was a grey zone and still is. But on the railroad in the direction of Stepov, the occupants had successes and were able to gain a foothold in several areas. But the existing enemy control does not give him the opportunity to deploy a new breakthrough directly to Stepov and to Berdichi, which is another important node of defense. The Russian army was unable to take Avdiivka. The reserves of the 1st Army Corps suffered significant losses, and it was reported that the Russian Ministry of Defense threw the Wagnerites into the battle. Probably on such an occasion they were amnestied, despite the mutiny, because the enemy has no other reserves to storm Avdiivka. The Russian army is constrained by fighting along the entire front. Or they need to weaken their positions somewhere, for example in the Lugansk direction. We will soon see. It is also quite likely that the Russian General Staff is throwing Wagnerites into the battle in order to shift the responsibility for the failure of the offensive from the regular army to the convicts. If at first it could be regarded as actions similar to the summer operation near Kupinsk aimed at diverting the reserves of the AFU, then after numerous videos of burning armored vehicles and the constant resumption of attacks by columns, it became clear that this is an attempt to encircle and capture the city. Putin has been muttering in his speeches for 3 months now that the Ukrainian offensive in the south has failed. And if the Russian army had managed to take Avdiivka by storm, he would have put a fat point. Look, the Ukrainians suffered for 4 months, and our army captured Avdiivka so quickly. So they accumulated forces and threw in an attack against one of the most fortified areas. Earlier I said that the Russian side does not have the capacity for a large-scale offensive along the entire front, only for a local one. This is actually what we are seeing, as well as attempts in several other parts of the front. I think the very belief in their own military reports played a role here. I can well assume that Putin really believes in the loss ratio of 8-to-1 in favor of Russia, and other fairy tales about destroying dozens of HIMARS. And if you believe in such things, you inevitably get the feeling that the Ukrainian army is already running out, and the Russian army is vigorous and all-powerful. And then you can send columns into suicidal attacks. But an easy walk will not, as the enemy expected. Now that the Blitzkrieg has failed, there is no way to stop this ruinous offensive. And how it will end, until it is clear. Pyrrhic victory is when you achieve victory in a local battle, but at such a cost that leads to a general defeat. Only it may turn out that they will not be able to take Avdiivka, and they will lose so much manpower and equipment, that it will have an effect on the scale of the entire war.